Hello, it is now June 2024 and I'm doing a review for this book, which is Sacred Contracts by Myss. So we're now in June 2024 and usually I try to do an update once a month about the books that I've been reading. I did not do one for May, and the reason that I did not do one is that I didn't complete any books. I was reading this book, Sacred Contracts, which has been really, really good. But it's taken a really, really long time. So the book is not ridiculously long. It's like, well, actually it is 500 pages. But she wants you to do a lot of writing when you're reading this book. And I literally have filled this notepad with writing. And so she's really getting you to try and delve deep into your thoughts and feelings. And it has been, I think it's been really useful actually. I think it has been really good. It's just taken a really long time. I feel like I've written the book while I've been reading this book. So for that reason, I didn't do a review in May. But we're in June now. I've finished the book. So I want to talk about what I think about it. So I wanted to read a book by Myss for quite a while. I have watched tons of her videos and I think she's really, really good. She's sort of, you know, she's helping people on their spiritual path in different ways. She's very good. She's very spiritual. She probably knows what she's talking about, but she's a bit... she's not too soft and airy-fairy because that doesn't appeal to me. So I think she's really, really good. And I definitely recommend looking up some of her videos and reading certainly this book. So in this book, Sacred Contracts, what she talks about is that we all have sort of contracts that we've made with different people. So that we made these contracts before we came here to Earth. And that there are things that we need to learn from people and that people need to learn from us. And what she talks about a lot in this book is archetypes. So archetypes are kind of like things that are like a socially accepted sort of view of things, and they're reinforced through books, stories, films, all these sorts of things. So if somebody says, you know, king, you kind of know what a king means, and you know, all the sort of things that go along with that. So if a man is sort of kingly, you know what that means. And if he's not kingly, you know what that means. So it's those archetypes. And she's saying that we all have 12 archetypes that we basically have designed our character from. And she's getting you to learn what your archetypes are, learn areas of your psyche, your life, where these archetypes act, and to try and understand perhaps why you make certain choices, why you may have weaknesses in areas that you don't always completely understand, and to understand your strengths as well, and to maybe work with them a bit better and to help yourself. You know, it's a bit of a self-help book. Okay, so that's why I wanted to read it. I did enjoy it a lot. I thought it was a really good book. However, having said that, I would say that this book is sort of split into 3 parts. You've got the first part where she's sort of explaining what archetypes are, and she uses a lot of myths and religious characters and stories to explain what archetypes are and how understanding them helps people on their spiritual journey and things like this. This section of the book I found really boring and was a bit of a struggle to get through. It was a bit too religious for me and it just seemed to go on and on and on. Then the middle section of the book is where you sort of learn about the different archetypes and decide which ones you have and decide whereabouts in your life they're strongest. This part I really liked. It was really interesting. I really liked it. It's interesting how you realise that there are certain archetypes that you've always had where you read about one and you think, yes, I've definitely said that about myself, or people have said that about me, so that's there. or that's a feeling that I've had. Yeah, and sometimes they might not be particularly positive things. And so sometimes there are negative things that you might notice about yourself, thinking, oh, I am always a bit like that. Or it's got to be something that's sort of been, gone on quite a lot in your life. She explains that there are sort of 4 main archetypes that everybody has, or as she calls them, the 4 survival archetypes, which are the child, the victim, the prostitute, and the saboteur. And then she talks about them in a lot of detail, and that's really interesting to understand that we all have them, and wherever we are, at whatever stage in our life, they are always playing some kind of part. And to understand them, obviously they have a shadow side, but also trying to understand how they can be used positively. It was really, really informative and interesting, and also I think it's really good to look at some of these things as well, especially ones that you may feel are more negative, and to be honest and say that, yeah, I do have that, and I can fall into that, and then to try and understand it a bit more and work with it. And then in the sort of last section of the book, she talks about making, sort of actively working on more specific things that you want to understand or know how to approach and deal with, such as it could be something like a job you want to do, or changing career, or a new relationship, or something that you want a bit more guidance on. It's not a fortune, in a crystal ball. It's just to understand this thing that's coming up in my life, how my archetypes, how they're going to play out here, and what do I need to be aware of, and what strengths can I lean on, things like that. So it was really, really good. Yeah, the thing as well in the last part, I think you realise that it is, that there is work to do. It's not just about understanding it, it's about using that knowledge and actually trying to change your approaches to things or how you deal with things. Okay, so I haven't got many quotes. I think I've got like literally 2, so I'm going to read them out quickly. It was a really well written book. She's a really good writer. Apart from the first section, I just found the subject matter too boring. Other than that, throughout the rest of the book, I really enjoyed her writing. She's very good at saying a lot in a sentence, so that you can really read back over it and see how much is in it. Okay, so in this quote, she's been talking about. So she's been talking about sort of the shadow side of some of the archetypes, and sort of taking responsibility and learning how to use what you get. Because like all this writing, you do think about a lot of things, and it does rake up a lot of things that you've not necessarily. It's not about sort of going over the same thing over and over again, but it's where sometimes you think, oh yeah, I've dealt with that. That's done. That's all done, and actually going back over it and asking some different questions and thinking, oh yeah, that's not done. There is a bit more stuff there that I had been holding on to or expressing in a different way. Okay, anyway, so she writes here, awareness of a greater truth adds time pressure to your psyche and spirit, because the more you know, the faster you need to respond to that truth. I call this spiritual accountability. If you realise that negative judgments, including judging yourself, cause harm, then you must reevaluate your behaviour as soon as you realise that you are being judgmental. You also need to recognise when you are justifying yourself and your actions. Judging others and creating excuses while knowing better are only 2 of the spiritual challenges that will arise as you work with your survival archetypes. The more aware you are of the demands of managing your consciousness, the fewer hiding places will be available in your psyche and soul for the shadow play of the child, victim, prostitute, and saboteur. This relationship between awareness and responsibility also applies to your health. Once you become aware of how toxic anger or guilt is to your body and spirit, the consequences of these energy poisons become more pronounced than if you did not know better. If for no other reason than that you now know their biological effects. This is negative visualization in action. Okay, so she's talking about. So I like when she was talking. I think there's a lot of that thing about judgment. I've sort of worked. Like, I don't think I'm a particularly judgmental person anyway, but I certainly realised doing this and some other things that I'm very, very judgmental about myself. Like, just in a really kind of basic way about a lot of things. So it's been really helpful to me to try and think, like, how would I feel about saying that about somebody else? Like, you know, I wouldn't say that about somebody else. Or, you know, how would I feel if somebody was saying that about somebody that I cared about? Or so it's been really, really good. And then, yeah, and she talks about this sort of managing the shadow side of these 4 survival archetypes, and recognising that we all have them, and that they do have their shadow side. And then she also talks about how this applies to your health, and this is one of the other things that I really find interesting about her, is that she is a medical intuitive, which is a bit of a strange phrase, isn't it? Because we think of medical as like all science and rational, and intuitive as like the opposite, really. But this is a really interesting area that I think I first heard her speak about it properly, and now I've heard other people speak about it. But it's such a really different and interesting way to look at health, and I can't help feeling that there is a lot in there. So it's really, really interesting, and understanding how, when you are not dealing with your issues, or you are allowing them to play out in different ways, rather than being honest about them, and when you are not living authentically, how these things do affect your health. And yeah, it's really, really interesting. Yes, and in that final section, I think one of the things that I really took away from it as well is the importance of your sort of intuition and gut instincts, which is something that I have had to work on a lot, because I think I can look back in my life and I can see where I've had a gut instinct or an intuition and how it's helped me. But I know that on a day-to-day basis, it's something that I ignore generally, because for whatever reason, whether it's, you know, the social conditioning or experiences and things like that, I've just really learnt to just ignore my intuition so much. So it's been, you know, it's been a bit of a windy journey for me to try and listen to it more and understand it more, especially because it doesn't always talk to you in like a, I'm your intuition and here is what I want you to know. So this book really showed me about areas that I do need to do more work in and keep on it, and not just think, oh, I've done the book now, I can forget about it. Okay. So, last quote. This is from right near the end of the book. So, this is where she's talking about this medical intuitive thing, which is really interesting. So, she puts, as a medical intuitive, I have often observed the links between certain psychological stress patterns and certain illnesses related to specific areas of the body. Emotional heartache usually affects the heart itself, for instance. Financial stress, or the feeling that you lack support in what you do, often hits you in the lower back, and the pancreas is especially sensitive to issues related to responsibility. I just think this area is just so fascinating, and it just feels like it rings true, like there is something in it. Yeah, so that's another thing that I want to sort of learn more about as well, because it's just really interesting, and it just makes sense to me that if you're having, like she says, certain sort of stress patterns or thought processes, that how that's gonna, you know, ingrain and have a physical effect. Okay, so that was that book. I finally finished It did feel like I really enjoyed the book, but there was a lot of writing. There were some bits where she was like, write a letter to your archetype. So there's 12 so you have the 4 basics, and then you pick another 8. And she's got all these questions, like pages of questions to ask them, and then she's like, do that for all of them. But it was really useful, and I did really enjoy it, and I definitely want to read more of her books and recommend her. Okay, so that's done. And the book that I'm reading now is Walking on Glass by Ian Banks. This is a fiction. It's going very, very well. I have read Ian Banks before, and I do find him a very gripping writer. So I'm really enjoying that, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be finished in July, and I will be doing a review for it then. Okay, thank you.